Hey, this is now lesson 57 and this part of the course is on Keynesian economics. Now we've obviously really covered this already, but I just want to get into your heads exactly what Keynes did say, and therefore you're going to know exactly how it works and how you can write about it. Right, okay, so Keynesian economics was brought out really in the 1930s, when what happened was there was a contraction in the economy. So AD was falling, GDP was negative, and tax returns were falling. The governments at that time believed in balanced budgets. So as tax revenues fell, they also cut government spending. And of course, by cutting government spending, the multiplier accelerator would work in reverse, and you would end up with even lower AD, and so the depression got worse. So Keynes came along and said, you've got to increase government spending at this time, and he used an example. You would still be better off as an economy if you dug holes in the ground and then filled them up again. Totally worthless activity, but at least you would get demand into the economy. So he was very big on creating public sector projects, big projects, building roads, railways and things like this. So in a recession, the big argument has always been, okay, we should also increase AD, and it's not a problem. So for example, on here we have it. Here we are. We are in a great big recession. There's this huge negative output gap from here. So potential GDP is much bigger than actual GDP, which is the definition of a negative output gap. So Keynes came along and says, what you do here is you increase G. The multiplier accelerator takes off, so a rise in G will lead to a much larger rise in national income, the size of which will depend upon the multiplier. That will therefore then lead to a rise in AD. When there's a rise in AD, then we are then going to get a small change or a bigger change in demand, and then that will lead to a much larger rise in investment. That is the accelerator, and when investment goes up again, then we're going to kick off the multiplier again, and so we get this multiplier accelerator interaction. So therefore hopefully AD will increase to there, say, and that's really good, because we're going to get more growth, more jobs. We're going to have price stability because there's a large negative output gap, and because we believe in the Keynesian AS curve. The balance of payments will probably get worse because we'll import more goods, but at least we've got growth and therefore more investment, and the economy is doing better. So that was it. And then his big contribution at the end of all of that was that by doing that, we would increase our tax returns. So actually we could pay off the initial amount of money that was borrowed by the government. Finito. Right. Obviously, if this process continues and you draw another diagram, and you might say, okay, well, AD keeps on going up from there to there, and then we're going to end up with demand pull inflation, and then we're going to end up with a negative output gap, and in that situation all of these will then get worse. But as I keep on saying, that is the job of economists, to make sure that you keep demand growing in line with supply. Okay, now there's some big issues around this now, so why don't we just use Keynesian economics whenever we get into a recession, which is what we did do in 2008. We suddenly increased government spending, and that helped. Even though we had minus 5% growth during that year, it could have been much worse, and a lot of that is down to, across the whole of Europe, including America, they started to increase government spending. They also used a very aggressive monetary policy as well, but they did increase government spending. So we need to sort of have this in our minds really, and this is the level of national debt. And you can see by the year 2000, we had roughly, our national debt was 30% of GDP, which nowadays is considered to be very low. So if our economy produces £1,000 billion a year, then our national debt would have been £300 billion. The UK economy is actually worth about £1,500 billion. Okay, so 2007, even though these were boom times, these were the good times, our national debt was increasing because Gordon Brown was still spending lots and lots of money, and so our national debt had become 40% of GDP. Suddenly, the recession came along in 2008, and national debt in the last 7 years has almost doubled. Some people would argue it's even more than that, but we'll leave that for another day. So we've got this background here of high levels of national debt, and high levels of national debt create problems like the crowding out effect that we were discussing in lesson 56. Okay, but we now want to move this on to 2014. There's quite a few things on here, and there's one I missed off which I'm just going to add right now. The fourth one on here, which is we can increase G on capital expenditure, and capital expenditure is interventionist supply side. Okay, the first one is that we're actually using a very aggressive expansionary monetary policy. The interest rate is 0.5%. The exchange rate has fallen from 2008, and in 2012 it had fallen by 25%. Okay, recently it has in fact gone up again. We are also using a contractionary fiscal policy, which means that we're decreasing G, and then that will decrease AD. But what effect is taking place is some economists would like to call this an expansionary fiscal contraction. Now, what that broadly means is the government sector becomes less and less and less, so therefore the private sector moves in, and actually the private sector is more efficient than the public sector, so therefore this is a good thing, and therefore we have a thing which we call the crowding in effect, which we also discussed under fiscal policy in the previous lesson. The final thing that we can also do, a lot of economists are arguing for this, is that we should be increasing G, but we should be increasing G on capital expenditure. This is called interventionist supply side. Because in the UK right now, we can borrow money really, really cheaply, or a government can borrow money really cheaply, because actually there's a lot of confidence in terms of the British economy. Right, let me say that again. There's a lot of confidence in terms of the British economy compared to the rest of Europe, which is in the right mess. So in relative terms, we seem to be doing pretty well because we have control of our finances. That really links in with the Office for Budget Responsibility, who are an independent body who then look at the government of finances and advise the government of the day. So, however, Keynesian economics, and I'm being really cruel here by saying this is what Keynes gave us, but this is probably his biggest theory, is in a recession you increase G, multiply accelerator takeoff, which we've already spoken about on lesson 53. Multiply accelerator takes off, it will improve the macro performance. The only one that's going to get worse is the balance of payments. However, if it gets out of control and we get a positive output gap, all of those ones on there will get worse because we'll get higher inflation, and higher inflation will make us less competitive. However, normally we have a negative output gap, so all of those things, economic growth will improve, there'll be more jobs in the economy, and we will still have price stability. Okay, lesson over, Keynesian economics.